very big week. But, it's business. That's life. That's the juggle.
It is. I know, isn't it though? And we kind of have that whole conversation. Well, how do we actually make this work? What does that look like? And, that's business is messy. And sometimes we just need to do that and get over it and move on.
It sure is. How are you today, Jenni?
I'm really good. I went to Mackay yesterday for the day with a client of mine, a colleague, to have a chat to some businesses, found some beautiful artwork, had a really great day. But it's been a very busy week, though. We've got lots of things happening at the moment in the business. So exciting week for me.
Spring, that's the thing, it's that new beginnings, ramping, whatever things up, and exciting time, I think. We talked about that a few weeks ago, about a lot of people feel like this is the time of year where we're kind of winding down, getting ready for Christmas.
Yeah, but
we're the opposite. Let's boost it up.
100%. Yeah, definitely. I think it's a funny thing. I think the business these days has changed so much that we're no longer doing that kind of end of the year, chill out, take a long break over holiday, because not everyone else is either. Gone are the days when businesses shut down for 2 or 3 weeks over Christmas, gave all their employees the time off to, spend time with their family, and that's changed. So now we always want to be on, and businesses are sort of saying to their staff, you've got to be here too. So therefore we have to be here to support them.
It's interesting, isn't it? So growing up in New Zealand, we had a beach house, or they're called batches over there. We had a batch on the Coromandel at this beautiful spot called Hahe, and my dad would take a month off every Christmas. And we never really, that was just all I knew, and that's what we would do, and it was amazing. He had a film production business. It would just close, but do you know what? Everybody else did. They're Auckland was always just like a ghost town over the summer holidays, because everyone would go off to batches or camping or whatever. Yet, since I've been living in Australia, so 20 minis, I don't know,
a while,
4 or something years. Actually, it's very, even between Christmas and New Year's, people are still going for it. So I've always been really surprised, that difference in that stop, everyone take 5 or take a month and just chill. And it's definitely very different, and I miss it, I have to say.
I do too. I learned it when I went overseas years ago. My very first trip, I was always told, don't go to Italy end of July, August. So mid-July is when all the big sales happen in particularly like France and Italy, and you can buy amazing sales over there, get amazing sales over there. But then in August, all of Italy pretty much goes on holiday. So nobody turns up in to do, there's the kind of basic stuff, but, very boutique and family oriented stuff. They all go on holiday, and they do that. They take a week. And my client in New York does the same thing. She was like, oh, we're going to the Hamptons for the summer. And I was like, isn't that just a movie thing? And it's no, they literally go down to the Hamptons every weekend, or stay for 3 or 4 weeks, because they have that kind of separation and want to get away from it. Yeah. So we can learn something from what other people do, I think, overseas around Christmas. We tend to just keep working, and we don't get that break. We don't get that, respite.
I take the break just between Christmas and New Year's. I feel really good about that little spot, and I just, and we don't go away or anything, and we actually kind of hibernate, because Byron is just usually chocolate. It's actually just a really nice time to regroup as a family, and just catch up with friends and do some more gentle things. But it'll be interesting this year to see where things are at. I think it's extremely hard for anyone to plan anything at the moment.
Oh, agreed. I mean, we're trying to work out whether we're going to the grand final on Sunday, let alone whether or not I can see my mother at Christmas. And it's really kind of crazy, because that border bubble that used to be open, they won't even open that for anything other than, really essential services. So, mum and I are talking about, are we having Christmas? Are we not having Christmas? What's that going to look like? Which is a big change for so many other families that live in this kind of region at the moment.
Absolutely. And I actually haven't seen it myself on the news or anything, but someone in my group coaching yesterday said that the Argentinian rugby team had come down to Byron Bay for the day, and then they got from being able to go back into Queensland. So there might not be a game.
Isn't that ridiculous? Like that,
why should they get to go back? Because none of us are allowed to.
No, that's right, and they shouldn't be. And that's the thing, isn't it? And when they do, because let's face it, they'll find a way to make it happen. It'll actually become a big thing of, why did you allow that when I can't visit my mum, when you can't visit your family? And so it's all a bit kind of crazy at the moment. And I think we're all trying to navigate it, and we just have to keep on keeping on, right?
And keep positive, That's what we got to do, is just keep positive, keep trying to find the funny things in it. And
I know. Well, like we were talking in our CEO chat this morning, you've gone viral with your gif of "you're on mute," which has become the thing that everybody kind of says now. It's the catch cry of 2020 and 21 is "you're on mute," and the fact that you now have a gif that's gone viral around that is epic. Like, that's a change in the way we do business, isn't it?
I'll tell everyone what's happened with that. It's been a very amusing thing. So Honey and I, or one of my team members, the beautiful Honey, we've been having to play around with the Giphy platform, and my GIF's up to, I checked it last week and it was about 200,000 views. Today it's 315,000 views.
I can't believe that. I'm just looking at on the picture you sent me. It's so funny. Like, I've not only learned how to do Giphies today, because I've actually realized that I didn't have the Giphy keyboard, but the fact that now if I type "you're on mute," you're going to come up is just going to blow my mind every time. Like, seriously. And if you've got the Giphy keyboard, hashtag Hello Media or Hello Space Media, and you'll see all of Kylie's amazing GIFs and Bitmojis. Brilliant.
So, guys, what you need to do is go to settings on your keyboard, then go to general, then choose keyboards and add in the Giphy keyboard. And then you can send Giphies to everybody all the time, not just my one that says "you're on mute." Or But then I was showing Jenny earlier that I even have put on one of my Giphies on my email signature. So that was kind of cute. It's just me waving and going, "Hello."
I love it.
What made me laugh is that Honey made that one on the day that I'd been at the hairdressers and my hair was looking its jushiest. So I'm really loving that.
It's perfect. I know.
Really hair proud.
I feel like Macy and I might need to be making Giphies, but I don't like, that's going to freak me out a little bit. So I don't know about that. Mine will be like this. Be like,
yeah.
The unexcited one. I'll be like the new Big Kev, right?
Please just grab them from the videos, from the Zoom recordings.
I know, but that's still terrifying for me.
Go on, it's my challenge to you and Macy this week. Go on,
Macy, don't listen to her.
So, Jenny, let's talk about our topic this week, because I'm super pumped.
Yeah, me too.
Topic that you've been talking about a lot, I know.
It is.
I really want to hear your thoughts on it and share about origin stories.
Origin stories. I love origin stories. And yes, we spent the last month with our content collective group coaching, try and say that fast, talking about origin stories and why they're important and how we actually build them from just being kind of a narrative that is very much about us into something that connects with our audience and our clients and the people that we work with. And so for me, I think about the origin story in a number of ways. There's lots of different origin stories and there's lots of different origins that we can points in time. So there's that very first one. So what's the spark that led you to start the company or start a program or a particular piece? So when did that inspiration strike? What was the moment that you realized that you had a solution to the problem that you wanted to solve? And so that's where origin stories become really interesting, because normally they've been talking around that hero's journey, right? It's that kind of, what's my hero's journey? And if you've ever seen Nancy Duart's work on Resonate, she talks a lot around developing this hero's journey, and it creates that kind of, where were you at the start, and then what happened, and then you kind of drop down and something bad happens, and then you rise above it and you create magnificentness, and then something else happens. And so there's this kind of story that creates this journey for us. But that's only one of our origin stories, and that's the thing that makes it really interesting. We could have a whole origin story about how we decided to do bite-sized conversations. We can have a whole origin story about why I decided to do the Messy Middle coaching or the content collective or the business owner mastermind, or for you to develop your programs. But people only think of origin stories as that first one. Whereas I think of origin stories as evolving with us as our business evolves. So we want to kind of keep looking at our origin story and say, what's relevant now to our clients? What's relevant to the audience? Does it matter in 20 years' time? Will it matter that I started this business because I had a bad experience and decided, what am I going to do? It probably won't, because I will no longer resonate with that identity that I had then. But then the piece about being in Barcelona and having the idea at the Hideout Cafe on a Friday night is critical, because for me and for my audience and the people I connect with, that kind of shows who I am. I coach over red wine if somebody wants me to. We'll sit at a favorite cafe of a client and have a glass of rosé and talk about their business. So it doesn't have to be traditional coaching. It doesn't have to be traditional stories. So I get really excited clearly around origin stories because it allows us to share with our clients our intention about where we were and where we are, and also our intention and how that shows up for them.
That's a beautiful way of describing it. I really like that. So our intention behind it, that's fantastic. And I completely agree with you that origin stories are actually, there's many, many, many times that something is an origin story and where it's the beginning of the next stage. So you're right.
Yeah.
Because this is the origin story of our next thing. So like Bite Size, like Giphies, like all those things, they're all origin stories.
Yeah.
So what's your top tips, Jenni, then on how people can start working on their origin story of, for example, the beginning of their business and how to share that?
It's a really great question. And so I do it in a number of ways, and there's kind of two stages to it. So the first stage for me is sitting down and going, well, what were the key words and how did you feel? So think about where you were at the particular moment that created the situation you're in or the environment you're in. So I call that the spark. And I start by thinking about it not in a written word, not trying to create a story so that it's languaged beautifully and it's written out really well. It's more about saying, well, what happened? So I start writing in big chunks. So the starter for us is to do big chunks. So we say, this happened first, and then I did something, and then I did something else. And you'd literally just answer the questions, and then I did, and then I thought, or then I felt. And then you focus it on what are those big chunks of stuff. So you could talk about your life in 5 or 10 big chunks. For me, primary school, martial arts, Air Force, major events, sales manager, elephant in the room. So I can do big chunks to start with. And then I go, well, which of those big chunks are important? Which ones were actually pivotal moments in my life that actually led me to where I am today? So then I take out the stuff that's not relevant to people, and I leave the stuff in that I think is going to resonate. And so that's when I start to unpack those and say, well, what happened and what was the piece around that is actually interesting for me. And this is the kicker. For people's origin stories, it's always about them, how amazing they are and the journey they've been on. No one cares. No one actually cares. What we care about is what that means for you, what that means for our clients, and how does that show up for them. So for me, this challenge of when I talk about going to Barcelona, that resonates with my clients by saying your inspiration will come in ways that you may not expect it. Don't plan for it. But when it comes, take the opportunity to do that. So what I do is I provide a space for people to create opportunity because I recognize it comes anywhere. And so my origin story links directly to how I coach. And that's why it's relevant, as opposed to just being a narrative of my life. That makes sense.
Really, really nice. And it does. And then I'm loving that. I'm really, really loving that because I do it in a slightly different way, but I'm feeling like I could try out the and then because it's fun. So coming from a journalistic background, everything for me is the why, when, what, how, where, and who. And so for me, every single blog I ever write, any content I write generally, or not just a short caption, but if I'm actually trying to nut out, a bigger caption or something, I always just write down my 5 W's and my 5 H's. As I said, I'm very brain dead, so it's actually probably the other way around. Anyway, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
It is the 5 W's.
Yes.
Anyway, and so that's how I start mine. But I'm really liking that and then I, because it's obviously just another way of coming up with getting your brain thinking and getting those prompted questions, which is awesome.
And what I like about it is for them from these conversations, from our origin story, that's that kind of, head and heart piece. It's when I start to, rather than asking, well, what happened? I go into my thinking brain, right? But if I say, and then it actually creates space around, well, then what happened? Well, I'm not thinking about wanting to structure it. I'm actually just allowing the memory to flow, because often if we're trying to put it into a box of is it who, what, when, why, how, we get stuck in that space and we miss the little kind of nuances around. And that's the stuff that's actually gold. It's not the strict narrative. And yes, from a journalistic perspective, they're so important questions. But when I'm trying to share who I am, and this is where the origin story becomes important for clients and for the people we work with, is that we have to translate it from us to them. And so it's having that conversation. Well, what does it matter that I was in the military for people? Do I need? And I didn't used to share that a lot, but a lot of people have said, "Oh, I didn't know that. Now it makes sense." And I was like, "Oh, okay," because I had a level of structure and a level of process and a level of the way things were done, if you like. And so from that as my basis, I also learned there's another way of being. There's another way of doing things. And so I needed to have that structure and tell people about that structure for me to realize I released it 20 years later. And now I have a bit of both, but I don't necessarily live in this kind of has to be regimental structured space. But if I try to explain that without the military context, people go, isn't that just how people work?
Yeah.
And like the answer is generally no. But so it's about that translation. So when you think about then I say, well, what does it matter? Or you answer the question, well, so what? Well, you said this, so what? Who cares? What does it matter? How does it link to how you're showing up today? How does it link for the products and services that you're offering? So for the programs that you do, having masterclass workshops allows people to get really intense action and really great information compressed into a space because taking action is what actually grows your business. You know that. So if you're talking about why did I develop a masterclass, it's that you going, well, I realized I learned this over 20 years and it was lots of ups and downs and steps to do that. But I also know if we can press that into a short period of time, you get the skill, you get the action, and you build the habit almost immediately. So you only do the work. And I know I can. So you can use that as a way of deciding why masterclasses are really important. Ooh. So it gives you language to talk about what you do, how you do it, why you do it, but from a historical and heart-centered space, from in my words, that actually resonates with people.
Yeah, I love that so much. I just think that's awesome. And even as you were talking about what I do, I'm like, oh yeah, good spin on that. I really like that. That's great.
I am the ultimate spin doctor, right? That's what I do.
No, that's very good. And so, Jenni, what about when you're going to your next stage? So, for example, for you, Barcelona, that's such a beautiful story. I love it. But for you, evolving that story, what's the next bit for you then? How are you working on the next stage of that?
That's a great question. And the key point of that is because at each stage you're connecting with different audiences, aren't you? So my origin story resonates really strongly with people who are in that position and feeling like they want to start a business but don't know how. But as I've moved and I've evolved into a lot more corporate clients and I do a lot more strategic planning workshops and that type of focus with team building, I'm developing lots of core principles around teams and around team culture. And it's a space that I absolutely love to play. So my evolution for that is when I actually started to realize that I needed to ground myself in some core principles and understand how they're showing up in my business. How do I get consistency? And consistency comes with very core principles or what you stand for, whatever word you want to use. And so by understanding for myself what my core principles were, it means that anything that I produce has to be grounded in that area. Does it fit this kind of criteria of how I want to work? And by doing that myself, I actually recognized that I could actually create a formula and a model to share that with teams and organizations and individuals to create their core principles that allow them to actually then build their foundations to grow their business. So that's my next stage, moving away from I didn't know what the heck I was doing to actually, I've got the experience and understanding and I can actually lead you on that path.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love that because I think the I didn't know what I was doing thing is actually such an integral part.
Important part.
Very important part. And it's definitely part of your story. So maybe keeping that in there in the about section, of your website or whatever. But then when you're sharing the story, it evolving to me seems so important to know what that journey is. Like mine started with social media management on a digital sense. Like, yes, I had, TV production business and marketing business and but in terms of social media, it was doing social media for other businesses and doing it for my e-commerce business. Then evolving to that, teaching other people to do it and, grow their own businesses by getting better and better at it. And then moving into more of a coaching role with it, etc. So the evolving story and the ability to reframe how you share it is so important.
Yeah, and we don't often think about it. Like if you look, I've looked at so many people's websites and I look at their About Us page or their Who Are We page, and it's written from somebody, and I look at the person now and I go, that is not you anymore. Like this is, yes, I totally see that it's you, but that's the old version of you. And we have to recognize that as we evolve, our clients will evolve and they want to see us evolving too. They don't want you to see the same person every day. It's why it's the same reason why talk show hosts at some point, stop becoming relevant and they have to go find a new one to do exactly the same information, exactly the same time slot, exactly the same format, but it's a different version of that old person because that format no longer resonates with the society or the community that they're talking to. So they have to move on to someone else. Same with journalism, same with everything that we do. But we forget that we have to carry that story across, that we have to evolve. Because if we're not evolving, we're literally saying, it's one thing that's suggesting that everything you have is perfect and it doesn't need evolving. And that never happens because perfection lasts for about that much. And then it's wrong. It's changed because the world's changed around you. But also it suggests that you can't learn or grow. And you want to be able to show growth. And I think for at least my clients, and I'm pretty sure with your clients too, they want to see us evolving and growing and learning, because by doing that, we want to share that back. That's core principles for us, right? Is sharing knowledge, sharing. I call it wisdom. You might call it something else, but for me, it's wisdom. Wisdom is a core principle for me, not because I want to be the smartest person in the room, but because by having a core principle of wisdom, it shows up for people of sharing knowledge, and I'm always learning so I can increase my knowledge of my clients. So having that balance and having that choice between, why is that important? Well, it's because I've been in organizations where knowledge was really held tightly, where organizations didn't like to share information because you couldn't have all the information because that would make you too powerful. But now knowledge is power. So we want to empower everybody, don't we? So we want to tell them everything, and then they can go and do it. They have the choice then to go and do it.
Absolutely. I love that. So do you feel like your origin story, once you've been working on it and creating it and getting comfortable with it, that then can be translated into your About Us page, for example? So that, and then how would you recommend then that we keep evolving the About Us page? Because definitely it's a tricky one for me. And I'll tell you an interesting thing that happened is that probably my About Us page is the hardest thing I've ever had to write on my own page. But funny enough, when I was just writing content for people, that was a big part of my business a few years ago, writing blogs for people, and of all the web pages people would get me to write, most often it was their About Us page, because everybody really struggles with how to do it. And being confident in what you want to say about yourself. And then, of course, doing my own one was a really tricky thing. The issue was I felt like it needed to have so much information. And then out of the blue, about 6 months ago, it completely disappeared. Some kind of weird glitch. It was gone. I realized I had no backups of it or anything. I was like, good. I'm actually glad that happened, because it did need a refresh. So I did something. I'm not, thrilled with it. It needs some extra time spent on it, but I did it in a rush. So, because I didn't even realize that when you click on my About page, there was nothing there. So now I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a great exercise. I'm going to write my origin story or rewrite it and do a new evolved version. So do you think that that's a good one to start with, as your About page?
100%. And the reason it does it, because it changes the About Us page from a CV or a narrative of your skills, because at the end of the day, whether you have a digital marketing degree or a Cert 4 in something or what some other skills, no one again cares. Your qualifications matter very early on in your career, but once you actually start to progress your career, no one actually cares what qualifications you have. So an About Us page, it's an About Us page that focuses on, I have 25 years, or that kind of like CV style About Us page, which is quite common and is generally the format a lot of people tend to use, doesn't necessarily connect with people. It's just like, okay, they're real, they've got some history and they've done some stuff. Meh. But if your origin story then shares with people, this is my journey, and through describing that, you actually seed for them how you're going to help them. And so that's the piece that connects to the business. It's not just about building, saying how great you are. It's saying how great you are because I can now help you in these ways. And so actually talks through your journey, and then that seeds for them how you're going to help them and how you're going to show up for them, because it's how you showed up for yourself. And I think that's the connection, is your About Us page should be sharing some history and some story, but also it should be seeding to people how you're going to support them and what lights you up, and how, what your principles and values are, not in the traditional I value trust and honesty. Again, no one actually cares about those things. What they care about is I show up for myself, and I'm always going to give you best value, or I'm going to show up honestly for you, which means I'm going to give you really critical feedback. So honesty for me as a principle means I give you critical and open feedback, and I hope that you accept it, because that's what honesty really is. Trusting means I've got a safe pair of hands. So if I say to people, that my business provides a safe pair of hands for you to come and share your worries and talk about your business and your highs and your lows, and we'll actually help navigate together. And I do that, it's translating those kind of traditional words into a way that resonates, but also seeds the value that you're providing.
Love that, Jenni. And you always crack me up with your how does it go? I know some stuff, I do some stuff.
That was going to be my About Us page. I know some stuff, I do some stuff. Ask me how.
Stop. It cracks up, because you're one of the most extraordinary humans that I know, but in business I've been so lucky to have been coached from you for a long time now. You blow my mind constantly. And whenever I hear you say, I know some stuff, I do some stuff, and I'm like,
yeah. Some people don't resonate as much. It's funny. I love it when I say that to people. I had that conversation yesterday when someone said to me, how does that come? And I'm like, I don't know. I just know some stuff. And they just looked at me going, what? But that's the reality, isn't it? The stuff, it's the stuff. Yeah. And that's actually more important than me saying, well, I've got this degree and I've had this experience and I've got 10
totally.
And the way that I describe this is, if I'm falling asleep writing my About Us page, so is everybody else. So if you're not interested in your own story, don't expect anyone else to be interested in your story. That's essentially I was talking to one of our... but that is the crux of it. Like, that's what we forget, that our About Us page, this, you teach this with your client. This is what I love about you, is that you teach people how to show up on their websites and build their websites for them so it translates. And you and I have the same principle. The website's not about you. It's not about me. It's about how it makes other people feel and what they're going to do with that information. So it needs to be engaging, right? It needs to have some heart and some soul. And even if you're like even if you're the driest, lack of personality, business, whatever it is, you still need to bring that out. And that can be part of your story, is that, I've seen that. Whereas I'm this person, I'm a square block, I am gray, and this is how I operate. And if this is what you like, then call me. That's okay, because that's going to resonate with people who want that kind of bang, bang, bang mentality, or that approach. That's okay. And we judge ourselves in writing our stories, but this allows us to show up. But I've talked enough. I want to know how you, and what with your origin stories, how do you normally connect people with your origin stories? I know you said you struggle with the About Us page.
Well, I think because I'm just so overly wordy. I want to put it all in there. So I want the CV and I want the vibe.
Why do you want the CV though? Tell me why you want the CV.
I don't really want it, and I certainly don't put it in with anybody else's About page. But for me, there's something about that needing to, I don't know, maybe it's prove yourself or whatever. But you said something before that was just so perfect for me to hear today, which was, once you've been in business for a long time, it's actually kind of irrelevant what that qualification was, for example. Yeah. Well, clearly not if you're a lawyer or something like that. But, in this type of businesses that we're in, that evolving part is really, really, really important. That fact that I'm constantly being coached, constantly, what's the word? Learning.
Building your knowledge.
Building my knowledge. And for example, I put this little video together up on Instagram the other day, telling everybody about this new situation that Instagram has put out about hashtags. It's massive. It's so massive. And I literally saw it. I was on top of it, and I was like, boom, out it go. And I wouldn't have known about it had I not been, part of the, social media marketing society and all these other kind of things. And so I love that I can be sharing stuff as soon as it's coming out. So it's really important to me, as we've discussed before, that constant growth, that constant being on top of your game, et cetera, et cetera.
And one is someone watching
and just saying, oh, I've got this degree and this many years in the industry.
And someone's actually asked that on Facebook, saying, what about credentialing? And I think, sorry, not in saying thank you for watching. You're on the Zoom call. Sorry, I missed the call. Is what about credentialing? Credentialing is a really interesting, it's a very old school way of actually building credibility. And if you never met somebody, if you're doing a very initial conversation, credentialing works really importantly. If you're doing a job interview, if you're potentially, pitching to quite senior people. But I've had the privilege recently to sit down with actually some CEOs and some senior executives of some large companies to talk about Indigenous engagement. Now, it helps that I'm Indigenous, so I have to kind of let them know that I'm that. But the conversation, they haven't asked me what my background is. They haven't asked me what my credentials are. What they were interested in is the first conversation they had with me, where I shared my values, my principles, and the way that I like to work. And that's what resonated with them. For them, they don't care what my CV looks like. What they cared about is that the information I was sharing was resonating with them. It was honest. And that when I didn't know an answer, I said, really great question. This is my view, but let me have a look at that. And when we circle back, I'll actually share what the research says about that. So I'm willing to show up and show that I don't know everything, but I'm also willing to, share that when I learn it. So credentialing is a very old school kind of model of, it's that kind of Mad Men days, when we had to turn up and you had to have the right suit and the right space and go to the right school and have the right degree. I think when we've got 12-year-old entrepreneurs and millionaires in the world, and we've got, sneaker salesperson who are doing, Michael and I were talking about resellers of shoes who are making $1 million a year reselling shoes. No one cares whether that kid's gone to year 10 or not. No one cares whether, it doesn't actually matter, but they're getting an incredible education. They're building an incredible business. Yes, I believe it's better if they stay in school, but when they get to 30 or 40 in their business and they have a global business around reselling shoes or whatever it is, no one's going to ask them what university they went to or what school they had. They're going to say, how did you learn what you did? And by sharing their origin story, sharing their experiences, that's what's going to resonate with people.
Absolutely. So there's all these degrees now, for example, in digital media, et cetera, digital marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm fascinated by that, because by the time you've finished learning a module in 6 months, it's obsolete. The 100%. Next thing's happening, etc. So if you walk out of there with a degree in that, be like, well, I think you're better off with a degree in business, or my degree was in communications. And, it gave me a much broader, wide range of areas to go and explore. So it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, got my degree. I walked out 2 weeks before my final exams. So I got this phenomenal job and off I went to the other side of the world. And so for me, it's actually, in all these years of being in business and working for other companies, etc., the not having that piece of paper at the end was never a problem. And then I got offered to go back. Did I want to finish it off? And I ummed and ahed for literally 2 seconds and went, no, that's not for me at all.
And it's an interesting thing, is I think it does depend on the industry, 100%. If you're an accountant or lawyer, but I ask anyone on the call or anyone today, when you've gone to a lawyer, when you've gone to an accountant, did you ask them for their degree? Did you ask them to show, did you ask them what school they went to, or did you ask to see a copy of it? Because the assumption is, if you're going to an accountant, because it's a legal status, if someone tells me they're an accountant, someone tells me they're a lawyer, unless I've kind of met them in the back streets, which is not likely to happen, I'm assuming they're a lawyer and I'm assuming they have the credentials. I'm assuming they've got a license to practice. So, and someone said, yes, they have it hanging on the wall. Oh gosh, I got someone. So oh, excuse me for the very loud noise outside.
Can't hear it.
Oh, awesome. So I think that's the thing is, yes, some people do. I've been to accountants. I've met accountants at, the accountant that we use. I met him in the foyer having a chat to him with a piece of paper that he scribbled some notes on, went away and came back to me 2 weeks later with my tax return. I didn't ask to see his credentials. So I think there's particular industries where credentials are really, really important. But I think in the current age that we're doing, in the digital age, when life is being delivered over Zoom, over Teams, remotely, because the likelihood of us being able to see in person and run big workshops and conferences like we used to is gone away. And so it's now about relationships. It's now about sharing stories. It's now about creating environments that allow us to share, experiences. And that to me is what the origin story and the way that you would write your About Us is about. It's I'm sharing my experience so you can see how I can help you. That's essentially the purpose of it from a really practical perspective. But I realize the time, and I realize I could talk about this for hours. And in fact, we do talk about for this hours in our coaching program.
Continue it next week, Jenni, and we can talk about that About page and how you present
yourself. Would love to.
That I work with. Let's work on that About page, and then let's turn that into snippets of that can become our Instagram bio and our About section on Facebook, etc. So that About page for your website is the most important piece of content.
Definitely.
Why don't we do that as our topic? Because of course that origin story is coming in behind it to give it that
love it.
So to be continued. How's that?
Sounds amazing. So in between now and then, how can people find you, Kylie, and get in contact with you about your work?
Well, they can get their Giphy on their phone and they can type in Hello Media and I'll wave at them. That's one of my favorite little gifts. But no, they can find me at hellomedia.team. And then, of course, on the website, there's all the links to all the other places. And what about you, Jenni? How can people connect with you?
So Insta and Facebook are the two places I love to hang out. So at Elephant in the Room AU on both of those places, Jenni Walke on LinkedIn, and of course my website, eitrconsulting.com. And before we finish, I just want to shout out, it's the first day of Indigenous Business Month. So if you're interested in Indigenous businesses and supporting the Indigenous business economy, now is the month to do it. There's a lot of really cool events on the websites, indigenousbusinessmonth.com, and some great events happening. And you can, support local industries, which is interestingly, and I'm excited about, Kylie, the Indigenous business industry, or what they call the Black economy, is growing on average about 6 times more than small business in the non-Indigenous space, because we're entrepreneurs by trade. We've been doing this for tens of thousands of years as entrepreneur and bartering, and now we're actually coming into our own and creating an incredible economy around culture and knowledge and sharing of that.
So, Jenni, I just would like to say, let us put on pause for another week our About page. Yeah. And let's do Indigenous Business Month next week as our topic.
Oh, let's do that.
I'd love to talk about that and find out from you what that means, what can we do, how can we support, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's do that. That would be amazing.
Awesome. I look forward to it. Okay, so thanks so much for joining us, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you next Friday to talk about Indigenous Business Month.
Have a great week, everybody. See you.
Mowbray-Allen. All right.
Bye, guys. Kylie.